Decadent Serpent podcast, episode 4, interview with Daniel Soares. I wonder if you could start by telling me a little bit about what you do basically and what are your key inspirations.
Alright, so I'm a painter, an artist, a painter. I basically make paintings, right? I make pictures, but my main inspiration in art is the old masters and some of the modernists, and really there's also just like a strong desire to produce great art and to be a great painter. That's my thing, and the type of art I do is I don't like to call it classical or traditional or anything. I just kind of think of it as very normal decorative painting, or not even decorative, but a very normal painting.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a provocative thing to say, but we can get into that, I guess.
That is true. And that makes complete sense, to be fair. Like, when I went to see a lot of your art, obviously you've had still life, you had landscapes, you had figures as well. There was a lot of variety there, so that was really cool.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I know you said at some point as well that you, and I remember noting this in my review too, you were saying that you like to produce at least one painting a day. So how does that work? Do you, is that something feasible that you manage to achieve most of the time? Do you sometimes have to take a little longer? Tell me a little more about this.
Right. I mean, one painting a day is like, it's kind of another sort of provocative little statement, but it's like, it's not that complicated. I've been taught how to paint quickly, and I've been taught how to make every brush stroke count, and basically I've been taught how to paint a picture in a few hours, a still life, even a history painting. I could probably do it, like a painting with figures in it. I could probably do that within a couple of days as well. That big painting I put on Twitter recently with the two people in it, that didn't take me long at all.
Yeah.
So doing a picture a day is really about getting out of this attitude that people have, that they think that they need to spend years and years and years like obsessing over their project.
Yeah.
For me, it's just a painting. It's going to go on the wall. There's no point sort of suffering over it too much. Make the picture, and then when it's finished, make another picture, and then make another picture, and make 100 pictures a month. That's my attitude.
Yeah. I completely understand that, because I think if you create something regularly and instead of kind of going back to it and keep reworking it over and over and over, you kind of create this very interesting archive of continuously improving work as well, which I think is a very cool concept, because it just, with the quantity, you literally can see how your art and style evolves as well.
Yeah, you can see improvements. I think everything I make every new thing I make is better. The worst thing for me is like, I think the best thing for an artist to do is to just make a new piece every day, because, it's a really quick way to develop yourself as a painter. It's a really quick way to improve.
Yeah, 100%. It's funny because as a writer, I found the same thing with my short stories, and it's funny because I do like seeing this evolution of work, and how I don't know, with writing, for example, you go back and you see, what you did wrong, and what you could do better the next time. So then the next story that you write, you take away all of these lessons and you apply it to the new work you do. So in a way, it's constantly, all of these lessons are incredibly valuable. And it isn't to say that some people wouldn't, for example, like your earlier work, because again, people might have different preferences as well to what speaks to them the most.
Well, oh yeah, of course, yeah. I've been very surprised recently at the responses people have had to my work in the gallery. Like some people have bought pictures that I thought were horrible, and I didn't think that they were any good. But there's some paintings I've made that people really love them, and I'm like, oh my god, I can't wait to get rid of this painting. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to see. It's hard to see it's hard to judge yourself. It's hard to judge your own work. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to have other people to judge your work, but they have to be competent artists themselves. So it's very hard to find good judges of your work. Very hard.
I'd agree with that, especially if you've got disparity in styles as well. Like, I think, say, the controversial one, say you've got someone who creates in a futurist way, right? And they're going to go off and try to judge your paintings. They're going to still try to judge it through the lens of what they do. So obviously there's going to be a massive difference there.
Oh yeah. There's no point even talking about it. Yeah, there's just this like I get criticized by people, all sorts of people who do all sorts of different things, and I'm at the point now where I've kind of realized recently that these criticisms don't matter at all. Like if some guy, like a couple of weeks ago, some guy went into my gallery and he didn't like the stuff, but he was a one-off, Most people are already into what's in there, But this guy didn't like it, and it's because he had a bias towards abstract art, right? And so he wasn't being direct with me. He wasn't like being clear with me and telling me exactly what the problem was. He was saying, "Oh, I think you should do this instead, and I think I think it'd be better if you did this style instead." And it's like that's the kind of critique you get from someone who doesn't have an education in painting. So the only critique I trust is from other painters who I trust. And there's only 3 or 4. There's only 2 or 3 maybe painters who I trust their critique. Everyone else who critiques my work, I just think they're naive, to be honest. Yeah. I just think they're very naive.
No,
but for the most part, it's kind of innocent. I think that I think people who critique my work might just not. It's innocent in a way. They don't really understand it. They don't really understand why they don't like it, but they don't understand why, and they're just trying to say something, but nothing's making any sense, and so it's kind of it's sort of I get a lot of pointless criticism.
Yeah, again, like it's. Sorry for returning to all the writing comparisons, but it's like, if I write literary fiction and show it to someone who writes crime, they're not going to get it because they write crime. They can only understand crime. So if they're going to tell me, "Oh, I think you should add some more action to your story," it's like, no, it's literary fiction. It doesn't exactly work like that. So Again, it makes complete sense. It's really difficult to judge something if you don't fully understand and if you don't do things like, I feel like we all have our people we consider our true masters in a way, like what we try to style ourselves after, right? So for you it would be certain painters. Like there's a certain vision, certain kind of hero in your head of who, like how you want to create and what you want it ideally to look like, and it's going to be close to your biggest inspiration, right? And I feel like if someone falls completely outside of those boundaries, you're just not going to have anything in common in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely. There's I mean, it's interesting though, because for me, I feel like I can critique everyone else, but that's a different problem. But yeah, I mean, people, for the most part, if somebody is not interested in the type of art that I'm interested in, then they're not really going to be very good critics of what I'm doing, because it's it will just be. Yeah, it just doesn't really. It's just not helpful, basically.
Yeah. No.
What they say won't be helpful, basically. But the guys who do, my 2 or 3 close friends of mine, like, their criticism is great. It's like you get some critique on your work and you apply it, and it actually improves what you've done. You know, it's a practical. I get a lot of very good practical criticism. And it's very useful.
That's really good. No, it's nice that you've got people. You've got a little kind of an opportunity to discuss this with someone else, and you don't have to just kind of rely on just kind of the vague inspiration of something else. And on that note, I did want to ask, because you did mention at some point about the kind of importance of copying the old masters and kind of learning from the old masters. In order to truly learn how to paint. So I wanted to ask, first of all, who would you consider those proper old masters, and what kind of things you've adopted from them?
So, I mean, for me, basically every... this is kind of complicated, but there's a lineage... There's a school of painters there's a lineage that goes from Giotto to Renoir, and you can and this is the timeline of art history as we see it in the West, but this is the real sort of timeline of the history of art. It goes from Giotto to Renoir, and you can expand that a bit. You can include abstract expressionism if you like. I can, because I feel that abstract expressionism has kind of shown me a lot about painting. But then you can also look at like some ancient Roman frescoes, maybe. Except the issue with the Roman frescoes is that we have very few of them, and the ones that we do have probably aren't even the best ones that they could do. Yeah. So we don't really have much of that to look at. But for me, what was the question again? It was like, who's the masters? And for me, it's like everyone from Giotto to Renoir, and perhaps including the expressionists and some of those modernists. And
so what did you learn from them?
Yeah.
What kind of techniques and lessons you've basically found to and applied in your own painting?
Basically, every good painting has a kind of structure to it. Has particular tricks that have been done. Has a certain structure to it, let's say. And it's not necessarily like specific painters that teach me about painting, although there are specific painters that have taught me a lot about painting, but it's painting in general.
Yeah.
Visual art in general. So I judge a good painting visually. I don't judge a good painting via some ideas in my head, or I don't think of when I'm judging a painting, I'm not thinking about the concept or what it means. I'm not thinking about the story in the picture. I'm not thinking about any of that. I'm thinking about, all right, so I'm looking at it with my eyes, and and if it's good, I can tell it's good. It's like I have this instinct, I like when I look at anything that's beautiful, I can immediately see it. It's the same with painting. A good painting is kind of very apparent, very obvious to the eye.
Yeah.
And then with that, when you do see a good painting, and you become obsessed with the thing, right? You want to kind of, and if you want to learn how to produce a painting like that, for me, well, you start to, the best thing is to sort of deconstruct it in a way and try to understand how it was made, how it was built, try and sort of figure out how the paint was applied, how the things were drawn, how the things were colored, and figure that out and then apply it to your own paintings. And the reason I say there's no specific artist, even there is specific artists, but the reason I say there isn't any is because all the great masters, they share so much in common that, I just look at all of them. And some of them have better paintings than others. Some of them are better than others. But there's plenty of times when you find an old painter who is not very well known, who has made something very, very good. Mm-hmm. And, so there's basically, it's learning how to look at paintings and trying to understand the laws the laws that go into producing a great work of a great painting, basically.
Yeah.
And, that can even be non-Western art. A lot of Japanese and Chinese stuff is pretty interesting as well. There's a lot of interesting art out there outside of the West as well. I mean, for me, European Western art is the best, but there's other interesting stuff too,
Absolutely. I suppose inherently, it's all about the objective beauty, what you can objectively say, oh, this is universally beautiful. There's no doubt about it. So it makes complete sense. And I do think that a lot of your art does show that in so many ways. For example, my favorite painting, the Misty Landscape that we're going to talk about later on, because I absolutely love it. I think that's something that touches that part where it's just beautiful. Obviously, you're going to have another layer where, whoever looks at it, can add more, more interpretation to it, death of the author and such. But the biggest point, it must be immediately appealing. If it's not appealing, it's not exactly what you want to be creating.
Well, yeah. If it's not visually appealing, then it's just not good. Yeah, basically. This type of judgment requires a kind of very simplistic attitude. If you approach judging art too philosophically, then the whole thing becomes very way too mysterious, and you can never produce anything, basically. As in, if you're too philosophical about when you're judging a painting, then it becomes very hard to learn anything about it. It becomes very hard to even appreciate it. I think a lot of art critics, they give us these, or historians even, they have these interpretations of great paintings, of great artworks, and these interpretations take us away from the point, and they stop us from actually appreciating what the painting is. So, for example, with that Misty Landscape, someone could say, and it's okay for people to have these interpretations, people can interpret things however they want, but someone could say something like, oh, this picture, Daniel Soares was a very moody guy, and he was having a really bad day when he painted this, and so that's why it's all misty and stuff. And it's totally totally psychologizing, and it makes so many assumptions about me. And it's totally, I don't think those critiques are very helpful at all, and they're not true. I don't think they're right either. I mean, someone could even say something like, that painting is to do with Brexit, and it's to do with the fall of the West, and he was looking at a landscape, and it was to do with the global warming, blah, blah, blah. It can go on and on, and I mean, look, I'm the painter. I'm the guy who painted it. I can tell people what it's about. I can actually say what I was thinking when I was painting it. We don't have to really,
watch you like
do too much thinking, really.
Watch you 200 years from now, someone will find your paintings and they'll be like, oh, this was truly the critique of Brexit. Delightful. We're going to put it in our Brexit museum.
Yeah, right. Stuff like that, yeah. I mean, you see that all over art history books. Like, I'm looking at Goya at the moment, and Goya is the most... Oh my God, they've applied so much horrible writing to Goya's work that it's very hard to appreciate like the kind of master that Goya was, because everyone just looks at his 3rd of May painting, and they just look at his paintings that were done during the French invasion of Spain, and that's it. The rest of his artwork doesn't get any attention, and you know. Yeah, it's because they've made it all about the politics, and then you kind of lose the really interesting side of Goya in that he was a great master. He was a great craftsman.
Absolutely. I know exactly what you mean, because I remember when I was researching him, there was a lot about Neapolitan Wars, and it's like, no, that a lot of his early stuff was really beautiful and had nothing to do with the war. And funnily enough, there is a lot of speculation regarding like the black paintings, the one that he painted later in life. There is actually a commentary that applies the political lens to the black paintings. So they claim, he was so depressed about the concept of the wars that this is what happened. Where you've got a lot of more feasible reasons for why he did that. For example, one of them being him actually going blind. So there's so much more to it, and speculation like this just harms it because it puts it through a lens that doesn't need to be there.
Yeah. And well, it becomes it turns the art into a piece of propaganda as well. That's a problem, I think. It makes the art then becomes a servant to whatever political agenda the writer had. I mean, I've got a big problem with philosophy, and I mean modern philosophy in general. I've got a big problem with it, and it's that a lot of contemporary writers they make a statement about something, and really it's just a kind of it's just I really don't know how to put this, but I'm drifting away from what we're supposed to be talking about. But
there's too much substance.
A lot of historians basically they put like a subjective opinion on things, and they're trying to sort of describe what a painting's about, but really they're just talking about their own little personal experiences and their own sort of subjective attitudes towards the world. And like, I don't think that that's really like what paintings are about. I think.
Yeah. I completely agree with you, because I think there's a balance to be had. I think like it is sometimes useful to see certain to know context to things as well. It makes it more interesting. And sometimes maybe it can help with interpretation, sometimes. But now I feel like a lot of things have flipped completely, where the focus is entirely on the subjective experience only. And then the form just dissipates. There's no form anymore. Like
I mean, we see that a lot in movies at the moment. They do. Unfortunately, I'm not really a big reader. But like I'll watch the odd movie, and a lot of new movies, the writing's really poor, and you know, and I think it's because basically they're trying to shoehorn in some sort of ideology. They're willing to bend the form of the novel, of the story, or they're willing to sort of like do something unnatural to the characters and to their natural sort of shape, and then their natural sort of behaviors. They're willing to bend it all so that to fit this narrative. And it's really, I see it in visual art as well quite a lot, and it's very evil, to be honest. It's very it's very bad stuff. In visual art, that's the whole problem with contemporary art. That's why there's no shape in any that's why contemporary art, like stuff like, for example, if you go to Tate Modern or any big contemporary museum, you will usually have a landing, like a sort of forum that you walk into, a big hall space where they've had like some internationally famous artist produce an installation or produce some kind of interactive art thing for it. And it's just a sort of, it's just like, it's a really shapeless thing. It's a thing that doesn't have any kind of boundaries to it. It's not really something you appreciate visually. It's all conceptual. And then because of that, and it's all conceptual, why? Because it's all about some idea. It's all about something that this guy is trying to say to us. And, you know, it's always something really ridiculous. I don't really get into any of that. I don't really like any of that stuff.
And that makes complete sense. Again, it's focus on the substance instead of the form, and I think that's the biggest issue. Before we move on, I wanted to add a little more to this. Like, think Eggers with Nosferatu. I've seen a really good take at some point that the reason it's good is because he focuses mainly on, you know, how things look, about the vibe and aesthetic. And that is actually a good thing. He produces great, visually appealing movies. And that's, you know, that's actually what matters. That's what everyone universally wants. And it's just, a lot of people aren't capable of admitting that to themselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are, I think it's a lack of, I mean, I know quite a few photographers. I don't really know many guys in film, but a lot of photographers I know are very into making something visually pleasant. And, you know, because I think when it comes to these guys in film and stuff, they're dealing with something that is if it's very easy for them to get into the superficial aspects of the art.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's very difficult for somebody who's doing fine art at university or something. They're studying at art school. Like, the superficial aspects of art are totally gone. As in, like, a painter, it's very hard to get somebody who wants to become a painter. It's very hard to get them to start thinking about, you know, the surface of the canvas. It's very hard to make them think about color and lines and shapes and these things, which they get dismissed as being superficial and meaningless. Whereas, like, basically every photographer I know is just into how trees look in a photograph, and they're into sort of like taking photographs that capture light and that have overlapping shapes and stuff like that. Like, they're not conceptual at all. It's really interesting.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Whereas you go to any art school and it's all conceptual, and none of it has anything to do with you know, basic practicality of like making a decent picture. Like,
yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like three depends, because I suppose photography is you want because it's just, you know, it's all it takes is taking the picture, but you have to kind of capture that fleeting moment at the right time. I suppose this one's going to be more obviously focused on, like, I don't think anybody dismantled the concept of photography the same way the concept of art has been dismantled, because everyone can understand photography as, you know, capturing a moment, right? But with art, the lines have become really blurry. You know, a metallic line going from one side to another in a room, that's art, apparently. But, you know.
Right.
So,
yeah.
You know what I mean? I think photography has not been dismantled just yet.
I mean, there's photography is like it's like I think of it as like a branch of the fine arts, like it's like a sort of spin-off of what used to be considered art, like, meaning what, you know, painting.
Yeah.
And now people make really artistic photographs. It's like it's a very modern, very new sort of art form, and I think of it as like you know, inferior to painting and a sub art, basically. I don't really
yeah.
I don't really think, like, it's too. Oh, I'm saying that. I mean, like, if any of my friends like listen to me, like, who are into photography, like, I know too many photographers, then they'll be pissed at me for saying that. But
dangerous territory
but
there.
Like, yeah. So I think fine art went through very complicated changes, and it's, photography is partly involved in that, but not for the reasons people say. There were great artists who were into taking photographs, like Andy Warhol and Robert Rauschenberg and Twombly. Like a lot of people were into taking photographs, but it depends on what kind of photography we're talking about, really.
Yeah, that is true. I suppose, like, the difference is that you don't create anything. That I think that's the kind of key difference. With photography, you capture. You literally capture. You don't create something from scratch. It's just not what you do. It's just you capture. And I think that's the key difference. And you can be really excellent. You can have a really good eye for capturing things, but that's never going to be the same as creating something from scratch. That's not to say that photography is, isn't a good medium. It is. It's just it's going to be very different to art and what art represents.
Yeah, I mean, I think painting is just a lot more complex, and I think it's not only a lot more complex, but it's got a lot more possibility, and a good painting is a lot more pleasurable, I think.
Yeah.
The issue with something like photography is it's always tied to illustration and documentary. It's always tied to documentation, whereas a painting isn't really. A painting is kind of, not necessarily tied to documenting anything, and I think that's a big sort of issue with painting these days, is that, like, a lot of serious painters, they're too interested in like documenting something, in illustrating some idea, whereas I don't really think about that sort of thing at all. Like,
yeah, I suppose that makes sense, because didn't you say that you also create from literally from your imagination?
Well, I wouldn't call it the imagination. I was thinking about this, but I think something I would rather say is that I create from the surface. I create from the surface of the canvas. Like, I create something using my eye, like from using my eyes, and manipulating color on a surface, on a flat surface. That's kind of how I do stuff, and the imagination is involved, but that's not really what it is. It's more like just moving paint around on a canvas until it looks good. And
that is true. But
yeah,
you paint forests, you paint rivers, you paint people. Do these places exist in real life?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, of course they do. But, it's, I was talking to somebody at the gallery the other day about this. This friend of mine was really insisting that I should paint from life,
Mm-hmm.
And, I have lots of paintings that are done from life. Half of the still lives are done from life. A lot of the landscape drawings, at least, are done from life. But, he insisted I do it from life because he thought that, like, it would be more. Well, he thought that he said that he would find it more interesting. The thing is like, I could just, like, paint something, like, I could just sort of invent something and then tell him it was from life, and he wouldn't know any different, I could just tell him it was, like, painted. Like, I could just make it up. I could just say, yeah, it was done from life, basically, and people wouldn't know.
That makes sense. Yeah.
I could just lie. I could just say, yeah, it was all done from life, and then it's not going to be. And people wouldn't really be able to, like, know whether I'm lying or not, because the picture has trees. I mean, what is a landscape? It's trees, hills, water. That's it. I mean, any landscape has that. And if you make a painting that, you know, resembles a landscape, it's gonna, you know, it could be a place. It might not be a place, but it's, you know, it kind of doesn't really matter. The painting becomes its own thing.
Of course.
Also, to add to that, I think most of the old masters. I think most of the old masters were kind of just inventing landscapes as well. I don't think plein air wasn't really a thing until the 17th century or something, or even later, the 18th century.
No, that makes sense. But still, so you can technically say that, you know, if they don't exist, you did pretty much imagine them. You did try to make them nice, but there are, you know, there's a forest, there's some path, there are hills. They are imagined.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, I mean, I've spent, but the thing is, it's complicated because I've spent my life learning how to draw trees and draw grass and all of this stuff and how to paint these things. So, I mean, I just have a catalog in my head of like 3 different kinds of trees and different hills and different clouds, and I can just stick it all together on a canvas. I don't really, you know, I've got like a catalog in my head of what these things look like. You know, I've studied these things for a long time, like, so I can kind of, there's a few things that I can paint from my memory. I would say memory more than imagination.
Okay.
It's more like I paint from, I do a lot of this painting from memory, but then because it's a new painting, I'll do a bit of collage, you know, I'll do a bit of like my own arrangement on the surface. I'll move things around like however I want to, and until I have a pleasing image. I mean, it's the same when you're out doing plein air as well. Like if you're doing plein air, like painting outside, like a painter is looking for a bit like a photographer. The painter is looking for a good shot. They're looking for like a good scene. You can't just sort of. You don't just sort of sit anywhere and start painting what's in front of you. You look for a good space where the light is nice and the things are in the right place. And it's kind of like whether you paint outdoors in real life and whether you paint indoors in the studio, it's a very similar process. You're still kind of looking for the same things. You're looking for the same pleasant shadow or the same pleasant light, the same pleasant shapes. It's a very... I mean, I'm going to do some plein air in the next month or 2.
Oh, nice.
Because it's honestly like a lot of it's kind of a big part of the reason is because it's easier as well, because the subject's right there and I don't really have to like all of this stuff I'm saying about like painting in the studio and arranging the trees and stuff. It's like it's quite laborious actually. Whereas if you're doing plein air, it's right in front of you. You can just kind of like. You don't really have to move things around so much. So it is a little bit easier. And I kind of need to produce a painting a day. I mean, I need to produce 3 paintings a day at the moment, to be honest. And
Why so many?
I kind of need to make things easier for myself.
Why are you
I've currently got 3. Pardon?
Why are you making so many?
Well, I've currently got 3 easels up, and there's 2 paintings on one easel. There's 1 painting on another, 1 painting on another. I've got a stack of 6 or 7 pictures here, and I've got like a stack of like 5 canvases here. Well, because basically I need to rehang the gallery because I sold all the good ones. And now the walls just have a lot of very mediocre, not mediocre, but they have a lot of paintings on. There's a lot of paintings on the walls now that are very just experimental things that. Look a bit rough, and people don't really respond very well to those. They're not responding as well as they were before. Like I literally sold all the better pictures, and now I have to replace them. So it's kind of, and I have to work fast because.
Well, that is something you do very well. So.
Pardon?
That is something you do very well, working fast. So I think you should be fine.
Yeah, the best still life in the gallery is like it took me about 30 minutes, and the best ones the ones that people bought, they took me like less than a day. Like they took a couple of hours. Some of them were done in 6 hours, some done in 2 hours. some in 12 hours. But one of them in there, I'm not going to say which one, took literally 30 minutes. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's the best one, actually, I think.
That's amazing. You know what? That's some skill, to be fair. It's funny. I was reading about Dürer recently. Can't pronounce that. I think he was Dutch. You know who I'm talking about, though, right?
Yeah.
So I was reading about him recently, and he had some beef with another painter. So he challenged himself to paint a painting over like 5 days. It was so funny because like he did a lot of preparatory drawings in order to be able to meet his deadline, right? And then the title of the painting literally has like, I think it was like it literally just says painted in 5 days, and it's the funniest thing ever. So I completely understand that. It's almost like a personal challenge for you to be able to kind of meet the short deadline that you set yourself. So it's honestly, It's a good way to do it.
Wait, so did Dürer actually produce a painting in the end, or did you just write on a piece of paper, like, painted in 5 days?
He produced a painting. It's, actually, where did I put the book? I literally got the book very recently. It's one of the big ones. 2 seconds, let me check.
Well, I find this very interesting. I like a lot of the postmodernists. They do a lot of joking around about this, and I find it a very interesting sort of thought experiment. You know, I find it.
Yeah, I found it as well. It was Christ Among the Doctors.
Pardon?
The painting was titled Christ Among the Doctors.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And he wrote on it that he painted it in 5 days or something?
So that was the title of the painting. It was the...
Oh, right.
Yeah, so he did the preparatory drawings, and... Yeah, here we go. As usual, Dürer signed his work with his monogram and a date. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah. The inscription, Jesus Among the Doctors, is written on a bookmarker that sticks out of the folio at the bottom of the picture on the left. It reads 1506/A, the Opus Quinque Derum. I will have to delete that from the podcast. So from Latin, meaning made in 5 days.
Right. Okay.
So when you look at the inscription somewhere, it should literally say that in Latin.
Yeah, well, that's good. I mean, that's, you know, they asked Rothko how long it took to make one of his paintings, and he said it took him, he's like 54 years old when they asked him, he said it took him 54 years to paint it. You know, so...
there are two different schools of thought.
Pardon?
There are certainly two different schools of thought.
Yeah, right. And there were a lot of artists, a lot of the postmodern artists, or the modernists. A lot of the modernists, they kind of would do all kinds of provocative things to sort of, you know, it's a kind of provocative statement to say that, like, this great master painting that you see in the museum was done in 2 days. It's a very, because, you know, in people's minds they say, well, how can such a thing possibly be made in 2 days?
Yeah.
You know, and so you have guys like Picasso who would, you know, would be quite obvious about this. You know, they're not hiding it, but they're very clearly just producing something very quickly. And the guy who did this the worst was Warhol, who just would do a silkscreen print of like a pre-taken photograph from like a newspaper, a photograph that he didn't even take, and he would just, you know, put colors on it and then make a silkscreen of it. A silkscreen is instant, and there you have the picture. And so it's a very, you know, I think it doesn't matter. You know, I think you should just be efficient. And if you're a great, you know, I think the old masters, they had a lot of work to do. They had, and they had factories as well. They had like a lot of students helping them out.
Yeah.
And they had a lot of work to do very quickly. So they had to sort of they had a deadline, and you got to be efficient. That's the sort of key thing. I mean, I was looking at a Velázquez painting in the National Gallery quite a lot recently, and the painting is his most famous piece. It's his best painting, but I can only see maybe 7 or 8 brushstrokes on the whole thing.
No way.
There's so many examples. Manet made these beautiful still lifes.
Yeah.
And they're done in like 6 or 7 brushstrokes. The whole thing's done. It's done in like 20 minutes. It's about knowing where you're putting the brush, the color, and like that comes with mastery. That comes with like knowing how to. The best painters are efficient. They've got good economy. Like they put a mark down and it's always right. If every mark you put down is right, then why wouldn't you be able to produce a painting in 5 minutes? Like it's because you're not making any mistakes. But here's the other thing. And this is the lesson to learn from modernism, from modern painters like Matisse and these guys. And this is something I agree with. You see these mostly in the churches, or the religious art is mostly like this. And the classical realist stuff is like this as well. Like really great art isn't about this this great big painting full of details and with a very shiny surface and very lots of flashy special effects and stuff like that. A great painting is kind of a sketch or something that was done by Rubens.
Yeah.
Is in a way it's greater than the final picture. And the sketch is done in 20 minutes. The oil sketch, he's clearly done that very fast. And so he's sketched out his picture, right, that he's going to do for the Pope or something.
Yeah.
Then it's going to be like, it's going to be like 20 foot tall, and it's going to hang in the church in some cathedral somewhere. Like the labor that goes into producing that 20-foot canvas and, making the skin look realistic and stuff, that's not really like what great painting is about. Great painting is the sort of that sort of moment that an artist, that moment when an artist produces the sketch and lays it all out, plans it all out, and puts down all the marks and where things are supposed to go. And I think the greatest painters can then, or the greatest paintings, like, are then, that sketch or that study is then reproduced in large scale, but with very few marks. So a lot of the Spanish painters are really good at this. Like Velázquez, a lot of Velázquez's work is done very quickly. Like it looks like it's done very quickly, and it's like you only see a couple of brush strokes. A lot of the Impressionists are like this as well. So, I mean, for me, I'm talking a lot now, but like for me, that's like what great painting is. That's what great painting is, more so.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you're basically the kind of the first thought that comes into making it. That's the one that counts the most.
But a painter needs to be for that thought to be any good. A painter needs to be very experienced. The painter needs to be very good. Otherwise, most artists who aren't well trained and don't have much experience, they're not going to really be able to produce something good, in that way. It takes a lot of experience, I think.
No, that makes sense. That actually, it's funny. This is so similar to some extent, I suppose, to in poetry you had the imagists in poetry. So their whole thing was to make sure that every word that you use in your poetry must be there for a reason. So to the point where your poetry is literally just distilled to the most important words. Everything's relevant, everything's important. So it's kind of like, this is it's very similar, because just like you've got every brush stroke has to count, and each one of them, contributes to efficiency. You've had that efficiency with the imagists as well. They're led by Ezra Pound, and literally, you pay attention, and you can't do, unless you're really skilled, you won't be able to do this. Because, people have a tendency to waffle. People have a tendency, especially if they don't know something, they're going to waffle. They're going to paint too much. I think there's always, it's definitely a theme.
Well, yeah, exactly. This is that's exactly that's exactly what I'm saying. That's what the skill is. That's when I talk about skill in painting, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about being able to do a nice rendering in a drawing, because like those great big paintings you see in the museums, they have a lot of like, there's skill in being able to render the flesh and make it all right. There's skill in making something look realistic, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Like making a realistic flower or a very photographic copy of something, it's very skillful, but it's not. You can actually train someone to do that, and like very easily. And I'm pretty convinced that like the old masters, like who produced most of the big paintings for the churches, I get the feeling that they produced it in a very industrial fashion. They would do the sketch themselves. They would plan out the architecture of it, and then they would get their students to do the sort of laborious sort of realism. The realism is also laborious, and it's very boring to do. They would just get their students to do it, and I'm really convinced that that's actually how it worked. In fact, there's very big paintings done by Verrocchio that were filled in by his student Da Vinci, and that's just what we know of. I mean, he probably had all of his other students do it as well. So, I've read quite a few little stories about, this great master actually didn't paint any of his pictures. His students did it. Yeah, but the great master actually designed the whole thing and drew out the idea in the first place. It's like he didn't have time to sit there like making sure all the wrinkles were drawn in the hands. You know what I mean? It's this. Yeah. So it's kind of beneath him, like when he's a great master.
100%. It's funny because you do see that.
Yeah. Sorry.
Like when you go to an art gallery or something, and you see this massive painting with like a lot of people involved, we now hail this as this like amazing massive painting. But the truth is, like as you said, for them that was a job. They were like court painters, for example. This was literally their job. They were doing this like day in, day out. Of course, they'd have people to help them, like the students and such. And we hail this as something that maybe it necessarily isn't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
It's just
like, yeah. Well, we misunderstand what like all of that kind of that veneer on the surface is. It kind of we students of like traditional painting these days, they don't actually they kind of miss it's very hard to learn how to paint looking at those things, basically. So a lot of classical realists and stuff like that, they like put the realism first because that's like that's the thing that they see on the surface of like of a painting by Rubens, but they don't actually see the structure behind it because it's not so obvious. Now this is why a painter like Cézanne or Matisse is very important, because they've just left you the structure of the painting. They haven't filled in the details. They haven't done any of that. There's just all you have is the structure. You just have the sort of the bones of the painting, and you can like I've learned more looking at Matisse than I have looking at like most painters, and my stuff looks on the surface very, traditional and flashy and stuff. But, I learned, you learn how to do that by studying Cézanne, I think.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Again, is a structure from it. No, that's really interesting. Well, selfishly, I want to know more about the misty landscape. So, time to move away from... Time to move away from the masters and focus on your own work, because that is definitely by far my favorite painting of yours. So, tell me more about it. How did it come to life?
I think I remember doing it actually. I did it last year in spring, like early spring. But I was I was trying to do landscapes. I'd been painting landscapes during the winter, and I painted a lot of landscapes last year, because basically I'd been focusing quite heavily on doing still lives and doing history paintings, paintings with figures in them and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'd actually neglected landscape. Like, I actually hadn't painted landscape for a while. And I don't know, there was something intimidating about painting a landscape because there's a lot of open space, and it wasn't very easy for me to decide what to sort of put into the open spaces and stuff like that. Whereas, now I realize that, like, most landscapes, in the open space, they just draw in a load of hills and a load of little leaves and stuff. And it's just very simple. For me, it's too simple. It's like, I need something a bit more. This is why I prefer painting still lives, honestly, because it's something that's right in front of you. You can choose whether you want to draw the layers of the skin of the apple, or you can choose whether you want to draw in all the petals or not. There's more to do. But with a landscape, it's not really appropriate to draw all the tree bark and to draw all the details in the leaves. What you're dealing with is a lot of shapes.
Yeah.
You're dealing with a flat space, usually a flat space, that being the land. You're dealing with a blank sort of open sky. And then you're dealing with some shapes that might crowd the space a bit, maybe some hills, some trees, some bushes, a river maybe. And for the most part, when you're painting a landscape, you're just arranging these things. Or if you're painting it out in plein air, you're looking for you're looking for the viewpoint that has these things arranged like perfectly for you.
Yeah.
I think when I was doing that picture, I was unsatisfied with my previous paintings, and I wanted to do something very simple.
Yeah.
I wanted to just stick to the basic principles. I wanted to have something I wanted to have one side of the picture very bold, very dark and very sort of heavy. Mm-hmm. And I wanted the other side to have some airy space to it.
Yeah.
And so I decided to sort of I wanted to do something incredibly simple, to be honest. And I decided to just I wanted to do this something with a swooshy cloud. So I just did a swoosh. I did a sort of like a nice, like, curvy swoosh.
Yeah.
And that was it, really. I've done that in other paintings as well. I've done that in lots of other paintings too, but not in landscapes. But I think it works really well. And there's a lot of old master paintings have this very same thing as well. It's something you learn that looking at Constable and looking at Turner. They do it in all of them. There's a swoosh.
Yeah.
You paint in a nice curve, a nice, a nice swooshy cloud. And that's kind of
that makes complete sense. Yes.
That's kind of what it is. It's very simple, but it's really effective. It's a very nice thing. And, this is like my attitude to painting. It's got to be nice. That's basically it. That's all I'm thinking about when I'm painting anyway. It just has to be pretty. I am very superficial and I'm very stupid. I just want to do something pretty. You know what I mean?
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what you should.
I'm exaggerating, obviously, but I'm kind of just trying to trying to express the point that I'm really just thinking about the surface. That's kind of really what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, you do need that though. It's again, at the end of the day, art should appeal to the eye, as simple as it is. And if it's not, you really should examine if you're really doing art, basically.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know something else. Specifically about, because again, we've talked at length already about this whole concept of doing, not returning to the previous painting and just kind of like doing one a day and just moving on. If you were to put them in chronological order, could you tell me about the evolution of your style? Hopefully I'll be able to put some paintings as well on the YouTube video as this podcast runs, so people can see some of this. But how would you describe the evolution, if you're able to describe it in some ways? Like maybe
Well,
start from what did your paintings look like at the very start when you just started painting? Then like go to the middle maybe, and then to now.
All right. Well, I've been painting since I was 5, 7, something like that. So, yeah, I've been painting since I was really, really, really young, and I think. All right. So when I was in primary school, up to the age of 10, I would just do a lot of just like silly paintings and a lot of silly illustrations, comic book stuff. I found recently a really good copy of like a Spider-Man I did when I was maybe 8 years old, and it looks exactly the same, and it's very challenging to do that at 8 years old. So I was doing trompe-l'oeil when I was 8, and this is why I tell people that trompe-l'oeil and realism is so easy. I mean, I figured it out when I was like 7 years old. Like, it just takes practice. That's the thing with that stuff. It's not really the thing with realism and trompe-l'oeil is it's just perseverance. It's not really it doesn't take rationality and intelligence. Mm-hmm. It's just perseverance and studying realism. Whereas making the bones of a painting is like the job of an architect. You have to think about it. It requires thought. Anyway, I'm drifting. So in primary school, I just did a lot of messing around, drawing stuff. In secondary school, I was into, I'm going back quite a way, between the ages of, 11 and 16, 17, 18. Mm-hmm. I did a lot of, I began, when I was very young, doing like copies of Cézanne, doing copies of Van Gogh, Picasso, doing copies of modern stuff really, and copies of Dali. Mm-hmm. And I made my own types. I made my own surrealist pictures. I did my own abstract pictures. I was really artistic when I was younger. I was like, the only class I really attended was art class. Everything else I wasn't. I attended, but I wasn't really listening,
Yeah.
So I would do art class and I'll just spend the whole class, just making all kinds of stuff. So I did, and I considered myself like, but I was taking it seriously. I wasn't really joking around. Like, I was making these surrealist pieces and I was thinking to myself that these things would be hanging in museums one day. I was thinking of myself as a very serious artist, even though I was like 15.
Don't we all at 15?
Yeah. I mean, so I did a lot of surrealist stuff when I was younger. And then when I got into art school, mm-hmm. I studied at Wimbledon. I studied in Wimbledon and then Farnham. I did a placement in Vienna.
Nice.
In Wimbledon, I did a lot of abstract stuff. That's where I got into like contemporary painting, like because contemporary painting, and it took me years to get out of this, like 10 years to get out of this. But the contemporary painter, like the contemporary artist, if he's making paintings, on canvas, he's working in a sort of like post-expressionist, post-conceptual landscape. Mm-hmm. And really, there is no style. It's really a kind of like, it's very difficult to paint. This is why it's very difficult to paint these days, because people are working in the sort of post-abstract expressionist time. And it makes it very difficult to understand, to learn how to paint. It makes it very difficult to understand what you're doing when you're putting a paintbrush on the surface. So I did a lot of different types of stuff. I messed around a lot with paint, and I some things were good, some things were bad. A lot of things were very weird. I made a lot of very weird stuff. Like I'll send you pictures of all of this. It's you'll find a lot of it very weird, but some of it's kind of interesting. Ooh. And I found it very difficult to like ground myself. I had like no foundations. Mm-hmm. Like it was better. I was a better painter when I was in secondary school, just like copying Cézanne and doing my own versions of Cézanne, basically.
Yeah.
But I went to art school and then suddenly like I don't know. I did a lot of. I did my best stuff when I was in my 20s was my abstract paintings. They were my best things.
Yeah.
Because they were purely like superficial. They were purely about the surface. They were superficial. They were just like nice colors spread everywhere. And I had this sort of gift for, you know, putting colors down and making a nice shape and doing a nice composition. I had a real talent for that, like without really trying. And that's my best stuff. But I did loads of just very weird. There's this school, the stuff I'm trying to describe, and this is what most people's work looks like. I mean, I wasn't trying to do classical painting, by the way, as well. That classical painting was kind of difficult for me to get into because every time I attempted it, I just made something that looked like classical realism.
Yeah.
Or looked like it just looked too much like illustration, like maybe comic booky even. It just looked something like that, and I already had an eye. Like even back then, I even had an eye for this stuff. I was able to tell when something looked like a genuine old master production, like something was being produced in the same way that Raphael or Titian would have done something. I was able to see the difference between that kind of thing and the kind of painting that so-called classical painters today do, which it just looks like, you know, very flashy realism and illustration. It looks like comic book art to me. Like a lot of classical realism you see online, and in the galleries. You go to galleries and you see classical realist paintings. Sometimes it looks like illustration. It just looks like comic book art. It's not.
Yeah.
That's not the kind of thing. That's not the kind of thing that like. That's not like the kind of way that stuff is made isn't in the same kind of way that Rubens was thinking when he was producing something, or Matisse or something. So anyway, I wasn't really able to produce good classical painting, good traditional painting. So I did a lot of abstract stuff, expressionistic looking stuff. And I would say that the German sort of like neo-expressionists were kind of like, those guys are, everyone paints like that now. Like it's basically people, it's very hard not to paint like that because people have such a lack of sort of structure to their education. They have such a lack of education, such a lack of understanding of what painting is, that all they can do is like just make these like really messy, ugly things that just like look like they were made by not even a child. Like even a child can make pictures with more dignity. They look like they were made by like a schizophrenic. Like they're just like horrible sort of like black streaks of paint, and then like everything is just, it's just hideous. And that stuff is like contemporary painting that's just what it is. And then I kind of got out of it. I managed to get out of that in like 2021.
Yeah.
When I met Paul, and I met I made friends with Paul's community on Discord, and like I started to learn how to do these things properly. I took it very seriously, and within a year I was already sort of I was on a better path, and I was doing stuff that resembles the stuff I'm doing right now. So yeah.
So basically found your niche.
I spent a lot of Pardon?
So you basically found your niche when you met Paul and people who are kind of painting in that style.
Well, yeah, they were doing something that I've been seeking for a long time. Like, but there really is nowhere to learn this stuff. It's a real barren landscape out there. Like when it comes to studying painting.
Yeah.
Like there's no, you've got these guys like Odd Nerdrum and the classical realists, and I don't know how to put it, but their paintings just aren't, they're just not good. They're just not good painters. And like you can't, they miss the point. They're doing that thing that we were talking about earlier. They're doing the nice flashy realism, but their pictures have no bones. Their pictures have no structure to them. They're not efficient with their lines. They're not good artists. So, I could only find one guy in the whole world to learn painting from. Only one person. So yeah.
Yeah.
That's the reality of that. Yeah.
That's insane. But to be fair, you're lucky that you managed to find them. So, that's just helps your craft so much. So that's really good. And on that note.
Oh yeah.
I was wondering, obviously there aren't many of you. So do you reckon how can the kind of art community, the art world, especially from the painters like you, encourage this return to form, return to the work that you're doing?
I used to think that actually I don't really I used to think that it was really important to kind of like, change the art scene and all of this stuff and encourage a return to traditional painting and all of this stuff. But actually, I now don't really care about that stuff anymore. But hear me out. It's not that I don't care. I think the best way to bring stuff back is to just do it, just produce it, just become that painter. I think that's the best way to do it. And I think that, I think it's very important for art, for my friends to try and stand on their own 2 feet with their work, which they can. It's what I'm doing at the moment. And, it's very important for us to sort of, make a living off the work. I think it's incredibly important. And I think it's important to do that without without the help of a gallery or without the help of some rich person.
Yeah.
And I think it's possible, it's doable as well, because the pictures are nice. And as it turns out, that's what people want. And they're kind of people just want to put them up in their houses, and all you need is a couple of people to buy them. So I think that, artists need to, or my friends in particular, need to kind of try and stand on their own 2 feet as best as possible and be making a living doing this without the help of, because the issue with the art world is that they force their artists to depend on them. Like the rich guys and the galleries, they kind of have a monopoly over the arts, and they force artists to sort of depend on them quite heavily, and they force artists to become, arse kissers and stuck up to them. I think that like a good painter doesn't need to do that. If you're a good painter, you don't need those guys, and you should just try and do it yourself.
Absolutely.
And I think that basically we should just try and be as proficient as possible, try and be as great painters as possible, always be showing people what we're doing, have exhibitions, sell as much of our own work as possible, meaning, get people to like hang it in their houses and stuff like that, get it out there. And then all of this contemporary art stuff, in my view, like, it doesn't matter. They can just like, if I'm doing this and I'm doing this for long enough, then everyone will notice, and then people will take an interest and they might write about it. They might make a big fuss about it. They might say, oh, it's back, art is back now. Look what this guy's doing. They might do that, but they also might not. It's not really within my control. And the thing with the art world is that's not within my control either. There's all these losers who are doing conceptual art and stuff, but I don't really, they can keep doing that forever. They can do that until they drop. I really don't care anymore. Like they should just do whatever they're doing. It's nothing like what I'm doing, and it's lame and all of that. But I don't know. You can't stop these people. So I'm just going to do what I'm doing. They can do what they're doing, and if they wake up, they wake up. But I'm not really counting on it.
I actually think that this is a very healthy way of looking at things, because I feel like there's so much time wasted on either trying to kind of fall in line with the art world, where there are so many expectations, or so much time wasted on going against it, right? Oh, the contemporary art is bad. Oh, this artist is so bad. This artist is awful. And it's just constant content. It's just content, engagement baits and content. And it's like, maybe the best way actually is to just do your own thing. And as you say, your own work's going to shine through it. And people are going to like it. And I think this is just a really healthy way of looking at it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I felt sick a lot of the time when I was just kind of angry at the art world. But don't get me wrong. I think there's I think there's some guys on Twitter who make really good critiques of the art world, but they're good painters first. First of all, they're good painters, and I think they're doing this on the side. You know, they're just doing it on the side. I don't really myself, especially at the moment, I don't really have the energy to I don't really have enough energy to put into that sort of thing anymore. Yeah. Like critiquing the art world and critiquing other painters and critiquing other artists. I don't really have the energy to do it at the moment. Maybe later on I might do a bit of it, because I do think it's kind of important to do. But I think the most important thing is to sort of the thing that comes first is to make the work and be the painter. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm undefeated in this as well. I love arguing with like art critics and other people online. Like, I think it's funny, but I've also learned that like these people are, for the most part, none of them are sincere at all. Like, you know, they're very insincere, and it's very hard to find someone in the art world who is sincere. And so that means that there's no point arguing with them anyway, because they just start calling you names, and then it's just like, well, you know,
yeah, it's
this isn't very philosophical. Like, this isn't a very good discussion. Like, what kind of criticism is this? Like, recently I had an argument in a private chat with a particularly famous Dutch art critic, and he just started calling me names, and I was like, oh my god, wow, I really triggered this guy. But
that's the thing. They just they don't engage in good faith. That's the problem.
Yeah, they're not sincere, and they're very arrogant, and they're too afraid to say that they don't know what they're talking about. The worst thing for them is to say that they don't know. So they have to pretend that they know everything all the time, and they can't be caught not knowing. And so, you know, the thing with painting is, you know, there's a lot of good writers who can write about painting, a lot, but I think for the most part, I think that the painters know the most, especially these days. These days, it's very hard to understand painting. And I think that the painters always kind of like have the most knowledge about it. And so I don't know, what am I trying to get at here? Like,
I get what you mean. It's like,
basically, there's a lot of people who are criticizing painting and they don't really know how. Like, they don't really know like how to do it. So.
Absolutely. You need to understand what you're talking about. Like, you know, no matter what you think about futurism, for example, like, Sam recently posted his review of the Futurist exhibition, and the thing that was shining through it the most was his knowledge of art itself. Like, he knows how to create things, so he could judge it appropriately as well. And I really like this, because even if you don't like the style or whatever, you know, you can still engage it through the eyes of an artist as well. And I think that really helps trying to kind of gauge what you need to from it.
Yeah. Well, I think, I think that the artists are the best sort of, the best judges of this stuff. I definitely do think so. Even though I'm not like really into futurism, I do think that, I mean, I think I can still personally like judge which are the best futurist works and which are the best and which are the weakest. So for me, when in the futurists, the best stuff is the Bala paintings, but the ones that are very crowded and have a lot of squishy stuff going on.
Yeah.
Those are the best ones. There's a lot of, you know, it depends. The thing is, it depends on your taste a lot.
Yes.
I think a lot of people can't really distinguish between a good painting and a bad painting. And okay, let's just say that, you know, it's a matter of opinion, and you know, let's just say it's subjective, and I'm just sort of stating my opinion, and, you know, what makes my judgment better than anyone else's, you know. But I think that, you know, this is why it's important to sort of judge paintings based on a sort of on a objective surface, like the objective sort of visual beauty of the thing. That's sort of the best way to judge a picture, I think.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So there's, it's complicated when you start to judge pictures based on their context or their historical context or political context or whatever, because that sort of thing is subjective. And so it's very difficult to sort of judge a painting that way, because every person is going to have his own opinion about it. It's like, so the Futurist is a good example, because anyone who's left wing can just decide they don't like the Futurists. They don't even have to look at them. They can just say, no, actually, because I'm a communist and I don't like Mussolini's fascist thing, and so therefore I'm not even going to look at the Futurist painters. It doesn't matter what they look like. They're all bad on an ideological level.
Yes.
This is kind of that's a good little, analogy for what I'm trying to sort of get at.
Absolutely.
Like, this is why I think judging a painting based on what it looks like is much more important. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think people get into, when you judge things based on, your sort of ideological preferences, you can get a lot of people with bad taste, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying the futurism thing is, I'm not really talking about the futurism thing in particular. I'm just saying that personally for me, in futurism, there's a lot of stuff that's like not very good. There's a lot of stuff that's not very good in the modernist tradition anyway. There's like, the good stuff is kind of few and far between. There's a lot of very problematic painters in the 19th century as well. And, I'm trying to get at like, how do we develop good taste in art? I could talk about this for hours, but like in the 19th century and the 20th century, there's a lot of problematic painting. And how do we know what the good stuff is and what the bad stuff is? It's very difficult. I think, primarily you need an artist is, you need an artist, but also like a very, very well-educated critic can also do it. Can also make these judgments. So it's a very difficult situation we're in these days, because the last 2 centuries have been very, very difficult. There's produced a lot of very weird artwork in the last 2 centuries.
Yeah, that is true. And a lot of,
compared to the one,
I think a lot of the criticism as well is very focused on like the ideological part as well. So it really is difficult to actually learn about this without that veneer of an excessive amount of context, basically.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no one's really judging paintings via, what's on the surface. They're making sort of like, their taste is based on, like the communists, they like their communist art, the fascists, they like the fascist art, the liberals, they like the liberal art. It's just, that's not really how you judge art, right? The feminists, they like the feminist art. Yeah. Now they're doing all this revisionism in the museums. In the Impressionist rooms, and I'm sorry, girls, like, I'm not trying to, but in the Impressionist rooms, there's always a bit where they're like, this is Mary Cassatt, and Mary Cassatt was much more important than we all think, and now we have 5 Mary Cassatt paintings and only 1 Degas. It's like, it's okay, it's fair enough, like, there were female artists, there were female Impressionists, that's fair enough. It's just that this is where it expresses itself the most, is with the curators in the museums. They always have an ideological bent, and they always exaggerate their own biases. So whilst there were female Impressionists, what you have now is like an Impressionist exhibition in a gallery, but the curator has kind of like deliberately curated it so that there's more emphasis put on the female painters than there are on the male painters. And
so again, on the
thing that's wrong with that is that the male painters, just objectively, they were just more important. There were more of them, and they were producing more stuff. That's just a fact. I mean, it's not like the female painters were also very good, but they weren't as active.
Yeah.
And there's many reasons why not, but like I'm using this as an example, but there's plenty of examples with the other ideologies. But a feminist curator will totally, rearrange and will totally rearrange art history to fit her narrative. It's terrible, really.
Yeah, I feel like it takes away the focus from, so say it's an impressionist exhibition, at the point where you manipulate curation into adding more like female impressionists, it's no longer an impressionist exhibition. It's a feminist, it's a feminist exhibition. So I feel like it's really, if you want to have a feminist exhibition of impressionism, go for it, do it if you want to. But like, if you want to literally cover impressionism, I think that's not the place to allow ideology to seep into it. I think it's actually quite counter intuitive and counter intellectual.
Yeah. I mean, this is in a way why I'm kind of against exhibitions, like, as a principle as well, to be honest, because the unfortunate thing with galleries and museums is, and this has been happening slowly over the last 2 centuries, is they've art criticism is also a very new thing. They've only been doing that for 2.5 centuries as well. There's been this slow push to sort of make art about the narrative, to make art, the galleries and the museums, they have to always be about the narrative, about the subject, and it takes us away from just appreciating art decoratively.
Yeah.
And in my view, art is decorative. That is what it is. It's decoration.
Yeah.
It's not an icon. It's not like idol worship either. Because religious art, to me, that's like an idol, an icon. That's not decorative sort of like, for me, art is kind of a hedonistic thing. It's decorative. You're supposed to just enjoy it. It's a delightful thing. That's just all it. For me, that's more or less all it is. But there's a bit more. I've got this other angle where I say that art is also visual poetry. So there's that as well. But that's something. It's not something else completely, but that's part of it as well. But it's still part of this. Like a good poem written by a good romantic poet like Keats or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nice use of words. The words rhyme very nicely. The sentences are very pleasant to say. With a painting, it's the same. The lights and the colours, they're all very well arranged. It's all very pleasant to the eye, and that's it. That's what it is, and that's what you've got.
Yeah.
And then you can go off and do something else.
No.
Art doesn't have to be revolutionary and you have to revolutionize everything. Oh, I looked at this painting and then I went and started a revolution and took over the government. No, it's like, I looked at this painting, it was very nice, and now I'm going to go do something else. You know?
That makes complete sense. No, I do like that. So to wrap it all up, I literally have one last question.
Okay.
If you were to give an advice to an artist who's starting out or trying to, really get into it, what would your advice be?
Join the Paul Talk server. Well, yeah, there's that. Send a message to me and ask me. I'm not even tempted to say what I think that an artist should do. I think, because there's so many ways that it can go wrong.
Yeah.
I can say, go and study the masters. Go and study, make master copies. Make sure you draw all of this. Yeah, I think the key is to learn to draw first. It's to learn how to use paint first. It's to without thinking about making a great masterpiece, that is.
Yeah.
That's sort of how you learn. That's how you start. But the problem is people aren't even drawing well. They're not even drawing correctly. They're not learning how to draw properly. So just saying you should learn how to draw and do a master copy, that's not right. I see a lot of master copies that are not good. They're bad. They don't have any structure to the drawing, and it's just a superficial copy. It's like a photo. It's like a photograph.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of bad stuff. So I would say the best way to get into this is to contact me or Paul and to get into it. But I hope I'm not like sounding too obnoxious, but I think basically what I'm saying is get a good teacher.
Yeah.
Get a good teacher. And there's basically, in my view, there's none right now. There are no good teachers. So how do you stop? You find a good teacher, and there's only a few. And you know, people disagree with me when I say that, but I'm just trying to, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say something nice. I'm not going to try and say something, sugarcoat it and try and be nice. I'm just saying what I think is the most helpful thing. That is the most helpful thing, I think. So,
yeah,
you know, people can disagree. I don't really care.
Perfect. Well, you can expect a message from me because I've been trying to learn how to draw and sketch, and it's been going horribly. So.
Oh yeah. But then, you know, you can get into it as well. I can help you out there.
Perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to hear.
Join the server, and within a month, you'll be like, 10 times further ahead.
Amazing. That's very good. Right. Well, thank you so much. This was lovely. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. No. Yeah. It was good.